Dr. Roderick. And thank you for your kind words of introduction. Thank you for Anthony for inviting me to be part of this conference. Dear friends, Asia was in the heart of Pope Francis. His last visit, and the longest visit outside Europe, was the 12-day journey to 4 Asian countries: Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, and Singapore last September. Though with fragile health condition, Pope Francis was determined to make it possible. This was his 5th visit to Asia. His first visit to Asia was to South Korea in August 2014. Considering the small percentage of the Catholics in this continent, just 3.2% of the population, or just 12% of the Catholics worldwide, the importance given to this continent is remarkable. The visits to Asia demonstrate the appeal Pope Francis made since the beginning of his service as leader of the Catholic Church to go out to meet the peripheries. The Catholic Church based in Asia, it is more by the quality of the witness of the Catholics than by their number. Indeed, in Asia, Christians remains very much in minority. And yet they are making significant contribution for the development of the countries. It has been always included in the program of visits of the popes to meet with the religious leaders of different religions. In Sri Lanka, Pope Francis made a spontaneous visit to Mahabodhi Temple, a Buddhist temple in Colombo. In Jakarta, he and the Grand Imam Nasruddin Umar went to the Tunnel of Friendship connecting the Istiqlal Mosque and the Cathedral of Jakarta. On other occasion, Pope Francis offered prayers for the victims of a deadly fire at the Putingal Temple, a Hindu temple in Kerala, India, where at least 100 people were killed and at least 200 people were injured. Such gestures of leader of a minority religious group helps raise awareness of the importance of giving space to the small groups existing in a country. But I think it's also important to note that Pope Francis not only had meetings with the leaders of other religions where the Catholics are in minority. During his visit to the Philippines in January 2015, country with the highest number of the Catholics in Asia, Pope Francis made it a point to sit together with the leaders of other religions. Interfaith dialogue does not only include those with big numbers of believers. This is a lesson we receive from Pope Francis. Pope Francis also made an impact on concrete themes of the dialogue. Being a pastor, Francis' concerns are more pastoral than theological. His appeal to serve the marginalized and the care for the nature enriched the interreligious dialogue. In the Istiqlal Declaration signed in Jakarta in September last year, the Grand Imam Nasruddin Umar and Pope Francis call our attention to the global phenomenon of dehumanization, which is marked especially by the widespread violence and conflicts and the human exploitation of creation, our common home, that has contributed to the natural disasters, global warming, and unpredictable weather patterns. Francis' spirit of dialogue and commitment to social and ecological justice is leadership grounded in compassion for the vulnerable, the least among us, were and are an inspiration and will be a legacy for religions in Asia for the years to come. Thanks to the wide publicity of his visits, his speeches are well communicated to all people. It helps making these themes part of the public awareness of people. Of course, we also need to acknowledge many other people, well known in the world stages, but also unknown persons in the villages who are contributing to this raising of awareness of dehumanization and exploitation of creation. With his gestures and words, Pope Francis has widened our perspective about interreligious dialogue and put before us challenges we need to continue to work on in the future. The name for the future is dialogue, which Pope Francis considered as the way to promote respect for diversity, commitment to a common home, and the promotion of peace. The concrete gestures, actions, and words of Pope Francis leave for us inspiration to take concrete actions and at the same time to reflect theologically. I want to use the theme of Pope Francis' visit to Indonesia last year as a frame to formulate the challenges he placed before us. First, faith. The theme of the visit was faith, fraternity, and compassion. Faith, fraternity, and compassion. The first is faith. Several times, when meeting the religious leaders, Pope Francis used the word quest. Faith is born out of the quest of human beings to encounter the divine. In Mongolia, in August 2023, Pope Francis began his speech with these words: "Allow me to address you in this way, as a brother in faith to those who believe in Christ, and as a brother to all of you in the name of our shared religious quest and our membership in the one human family. In terms of that religious quest, humanity can be compared to a band of wayfarers treading the earth with eyes lifted to heaven. In Jakarta, the leaders of the religious, in Jakarta, to the leaders of religions, Pope Francis said, the one root common to all religious sensitivities, the quest for an encounter with the divine, the thirst for the infinite that the Almighty has placed in our hearts, the search for a greater joy and a life stronger than any type of death, which animates the journey of our lives and impels us to step out of ourselves to encounter God. And when talking to the Asian youth in Daejeon in South Korea in 2014, Pope Francis made a statement that provokes much discussion. He said, all religions are paths to God. I will use an analogy. They are like different languages that express the divine. But God is for everyone, and therefore we all are God's children. This is a challenge Pope Francis places before the Catholic theologians, how to enjoin the belief in the universality and absoluteness of Jesus Christ for the redemption of the world and this theocentric understanding of salvation. The second is fraternity. Fraternity is based on shared dignity as human beings, created, loved, and saved by God, the Creator and the Redeemer of all. The bond of fraternity is endangered by economic and political interests, which tear apart the people, provoke enmity, and lead to wars. Policies of extremism and division, systems of unrestrained profit, or hateful ideological tendencies bring people to unresolved conflicts. Fraternity does not mean university and shall not lead to accept everything for the sake of unity. Fraternity means acknowledging the differences, respecting the uniqueness, but at the same time cultivate and promote commonalities. Fraternity obliges to raise the voice against injustice, against human beings, and uncontrolled exploitation of the nature. Pope Francis talked about harmony. Once again, in his address to the religious leaders in Mongolia, he said the following: brothers and sisters, the social significance of our religious traditions can be gauged by the extent to which we are capable of living in harmony with other pilgrims on this earth and can foster that harmony in the places where we live. Every human individual, and even more, every religion must be measured by the standard of altruism. I repeat, every human individual, and even more, every religion must be measured by the standard of altruism. Not altruism in the abstract, but in the concrete. An altruism that translates into concern for others and generous cooperation with them. To live consequently, fraternity becomes difficult where people let themselves be determined by the uncontrolled tendency to dominate, to be more influential, to have more followers, and etc. The religions are challenged to go this path of conversion, to give more importance on the real contribution to the progress of humanity than to preserve their own institutions and structures. And the theologians are challenged to deepen the theology of religions and promote interfaith dialogue based on this fraternity. The third is compassion. Especially during the time of COVID-19, Pope Francis reminded us that only with compassion we can be saved. Compassion is the attitude to be close to those who are most vulnerable. It opens also the hearts to care for the Mother Earth as our common home. In the general audience in September 2024, after coming back from his last visit to Asia, Pope Francis shared about his impressions about these 4 countries. When talking about Indonesia, he said, in Indonesia, about 10% of people are Christians and 3% Catholics, a minority. But what I encountered was a lively, dynamic church capable of living and transmitting the gospel in a country which has a very noble culture, inclined to harmonize diversity, and at the same time has the largest Muslim presence in the world. In that context, I received confirmation that compassion is a path that Christians can and must walk to bear witness to Christ, the Savior, and at the same time to encounter the great religious and cultural traditions. On the subject of compassion, let us not forget the 3 characteristics of the Lord: closeness, mercy, and compassion. God is close, God is merciful, and God is compassionate. If a Christian does not have compassion, he is of no use. If a Christian does not have compassion, he is of no use. Pope Francis doesn't close his eyes before the problems we have in Asia. And yet, he seemed to be very appreciative to the values lived in this continent. This, of course, is a challenge for us to safeguard such values, not just for our sake in Asia, but for the whole world. Again, during his short visit to Mongolia, in his address to the leaders of the religions, Pope Francis mentioned 10 points as a great patrimony of wisdom that the various religions in Asia have helped to create. 10 points. The first, a healthy relationship to the tradition, despite the temptation of consumerism. Second, respect for the elders and ancestors. Third, care for environment, our common home. Fourth, the value of silence and the interior life as a spiritual antidote to so many ills in today's world. Fifth, a healthy sense of fragility. Sixth, the value of hospitality. Seventh, the ability to resist attachment to material objects. Eighth, the solidarity born of a culture of interpersonal bonds. Ninth, respect for simplicity. And the last, a certain existential pragmatism that tenaciously pursues the good of individuals and of the community. These are the points offered to the world. The question, the challenge put for us all is how to keep these values alive as the contribution of Asia, home for this 60% of the world population.
Your Grace,
Yeah.
kindly note you have 2 minutes in your...
Yes, yeah. Pope Francis calls our attention to two groups of people whose role is very crucial to ensure the future of interreligious dialogue and to live out the values he just mentioned above. I will add a third one. The first is the religious leaders. Asia needs religious leaders who are rooted in their own tradition, at the same time have open hearts and mind to cross the borders to embrace others. Leaders who are not afraid of differences, who stand to their humanity and therefore are able to meet others as brothers and sisters. Francis himself is an example for such leaders. Secondly, the youth. To the Asian youth gathered in Daejeon for the Asian Youth Day in 2014, Pope Francis reminds them of the courage to promote interreligious dialogue. And the third, the basic Christian communities or the basic ecclesial communities. The Federation of Asian Bishop Conferences has been talking about the dialogue of life among the believers of different religions. In most of the countries in Asia, we live side by side with neighbors who belong to other religions. At the same time, Catholics are sharing their faith journey with other Catholics in these basic Christian communities, animating these basic Christian communities to be open and courageous in working together with people from other religions is an important task to ensure the dialogue of religions in the future, to guarantee the legacy of Pope Francis. Thank you.